Hi, I'm Hannah, and this is Whispers of Crime. Today, I'm bringing you a case that shook Sydney, Australia. The brutal and heartbreaking story of Lilie James. What happened to her is more than a crime. It's a tragedy that resonates across borders and generations. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. It was just before midnight, on October 25th. In the year 2020, 3 emergency call operators in Sydney, Australia, received a phone call that would leave them chilled to the bone. Before hanging up, the caller calmly stated that there was a dead body in a bathroom at a prestigious private school in the city. And then, silence. He ended the call. Within minutes, officers arrived on the scene. What they found was something out of a nightmare. A bloody, violent crime scene, and no trace of the perpetrator. The killer was still on the loose. Let's rewind a little and meet the young woman at the center of this story, Lilie James. She was born on May 21st, 2002, to parents Peta and Janie James in a coastal suburb called Sanssouci in New South Wales. From her earliest years, Lilie was full of life. Bright blue eyes, glossy golden blonde hair, and a spirit as radiant as the sun. She grew up alongside her younger brother Max, and the two shared a beautiful bond. Their parents, Peta and Jamie, were deeply proud of their children. Whenever they weren't working, the James family traveled together on vibrant, memorable vacations. They explored places like Hawaii, Florida, Nassau, Miami, Dallas, San Francisco, where they visited Alcatraz and watched a baseball game at AT&T Park, and countless other destinations. Peta often posted photos of their adventures on Facebook, capturing those joyous memories. Lilie wasn't just a vacation-loving kid. From an early age, she displayed a deep love for sports. Her parents signed her up for swimming lessons and competitive dance. At just 4 years old, she was already training at the Blakehurst Academy of Dance and Drama, under the direction of Alyssa Minera. It didn't take long for her instructors to realize Lilie had something special. As she grew, she embraced everything that made her a vibrant part of her generation, sharing selfies on Facebook, dressing her purple room in matching purple decor, posing in dance stances, and enjoying her favorite things like One Direction, Farmville, and holidays to Coffs Harbour. During one of those trips to Coffs Harbour, a young Lilie met another girl named Hosanna Athas. They became fast friends, and in a surprising twist of fate, they ended up attending the same school the following year, Danebank, a private school for girls. At Danebank, Lilie flourished, both academically and athletically. She joined the swim team, participated in drama, and eventually discovered a new passion, water polo. Danebank is an elite institution that charges roughly $30,000 to $40,000 per year, and prospective students must undergo an application, interview, and waitlist process. Lilie earned her spot and made the most of it. The school featured a top-tier aquatic center where she trained intensively. She eventually began competing in both swimming and dance, excelling in each. Peta proudly shared her daughter's accomplishments, like when Lilie won a silver medal in the Eisteddfod ballet competition, or when she performed a monologue from Macbeth shortly after turning 16. Lilie once wrote on the school website, "I love creating pieces through physicality. I like how it conveys a character's journey through movement rather than just speaking. I feel that Lady Macbeth reflects my dramatic side, It matches my personality and my style. It's clear that even as a teen, she had maturity and depth beyond her years. That same year, Lilie passed her learner's driving test. Her mom posted, "Let the fun begin," with a stressed face emoji. A familiar feeling for many parents when their kids start driving. By 16, Lilie was blossoming. She attended her Year 10 formal, looking stunning. Black dress, heels, a beige clutch. But despite her busy schedule, she always made time for family, supporting Max in his endeavors, and never missing a family trip. The following year, Peta shared another milestone, Lilie becoming the under-17 swimming champion. When Lilie turned 18, the legal drinking age in Australia, she began enjoying nights out with friends, dressed up, dancing, and enjoying life to the fullest. After graduating from Danebank in 2020, she enrolled in the University of Technology, Sydney, to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business. It was clear she wanted a future in sports. Still living with her parents in Covara Bay, about a 35-minute drive from campus, Lilie began working as a part-time water polo and swimming coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, a prestigious, co-ed, private institution in Sydney's central business district. The school catered to students from kindergarten through year 12 and offered over 20 sports and extracurricular activities. St. Andrews was the perfect place for Lilie to begin her coaching career. Not only was she a talented athlete, but she was also an empathetic mentor. Lilie had a way of making every student feel important. Her sessions were fun, energetic, and full of growth. One student said she could turn a session full of sweat and exhaustion into an experience filled with laughter and confidence. She was more than a coach. She was a friend, a sister, and an inspiration. Her positivity lit up the pool. Her coaching style brought joy to even the toughest practices. Parents loved her too. They saw her as a perfect ambassador for the school, warm, engaging, and enthusiastic. She even made the bus rides to and from competitions fun and inclusive. Her coaching helped many students fall in love with water polo. Some even credited Lilie as the reason they stayed in the sport. While juggling coaching, university studies, and family life, Lilie also played competitively for the South Wales Balmain Water Polo Club. Somehow, she even found time for romance. At St. Andrews, Lilie met a fellow coach, 24-year-old Paul Tyson. He was also a graduate of the school and had returned as an assistant sports coach. The two hit it off. Paul had a Dutch background and was born in 1999. He was the only child of successful business professionals, Esther and Steph. The family split their time between the Netherlands and Australia due to their international careers. In 2015, Paul's family relocated to Sydney when his father took a job with Vanderland, a company that specializes in airport logistics. Paul finished high school at St. Andrews, where he excelled in sports, hockey, cricket, and more. He was even school prefect his senior year. Popular, athletic, and charming, Paul stood out. After high school, he took a special Year 13 position, a paid role, where graduates work in the school's sports department. It was a prestigious opportunity. Later, he joined the University of New South Wales premier men's hockey team and became a regular starter. When the COVID pandemic hit, like many others, he was forced into isolation. He eventually returned to the Netherlands, took some classes, and then decided to come back to Sydney. He wanted to be back in the city he loved, coaching full-time. By 2021, he returned on a working holiday visa and enrolled in a master's of teaching. He lived with 2 roommates and was serious about building a life in Australia. That's how he and Lilie found each other, both young, athletic, passionate about sports, and driven. Their relationship began around September 9th, 2023. But because they were colleagues, they decided to keep it private. According to school policy, relationships between staff members needed to be disclosed to administration. They decided they would keep things secret until it became serious enough to inform others. Just 2 weeks in, Lilie introduced Paul to her best friend, Christina Avramis. Christina lived in Vaucluse, an affluent Sydney suburb with oceanfront views. The couple visited Christina before heading out on a walk near Diamond Bay Reserve. It was scenic, romantic, peaceful. But none of them could have imagined that just 3 weeks later, tragedy would strike. It was the week of October 23rd, and the school was busy. At St. Andrew's Cathedral School, the International Baccalaureate students had just begun their final exams. Year 12 students were also preparing to sit for the HSC, a major academic milestone in Australia. Teachers, coaches, and staff were running at full speed. And so was Lilie. On Wednesday, October 25th, Lilie had an evening coaching session. Afterward, she was scheduled to return some sports equipment to the gymnasium. She left her parents' home, expecting to be gone just a few hours. It was a normal task, and her parents anticipated she'd be home by around 7:30 p.m. But when the clock crept past 9 p.m. and she still hadn't returned or answered any calls or texts, her family grew concerned. By 11 p.m., her father, Jamie, wasn't just worried anymore. He was convinced something was wrong. This wasn't like Lilie. She always checked in. Jamie made the difficult decision to call the police and report her missing. And then, just before midnight, a disturbing call came in to emergency services. A man with a flat, emotionless voice stated there was a dead woman inside the school, specifically in a bathroom near the gym. He provided precise directions. Through reception, turn left, down a hall, to the right-hand side. Then he hung up without identifying himself. Police rushed to the school and followed the directions given. They entered a staff bathroom near the gym, and what they found inside would haunt them. Lilie's body was discovered inside a stall. She was badly beaten, so violently that she was nearly unrecognizable. Blood was everywhere. One of the responding officers later said, "It was the most brutal scene he had ever witnessed." Her head injuries were severe. This was clearly no accident. It was murder. With no students or staff on site that hour, police secured the area and immediately called in homicide detectives and forensic units. The school's security footage was seized and would become crucial in piecing together the timeline of events. Preliminary identification of the body pointed to Lilie James. Her car was still in the school's staff parking lot. She had been expected on campus that evening, and she was found in a staff-only bathroom. Though her injuries had left her disfigured, the physical build and hair matched Lilie's. Still, official confirmation had to come from a family member. That moment, asking someone to identify their daughter's body, is one no family should ever have to endure. And yet, Jamie and Peter James were faced with that exact nightmare. By the next morning, the public learned of a woman's murder at a Sydney private school. though police withheld Lilie's identity. Reporters referred to her only as a female teacher in her early 20s. But the tight-knit community was already putting the pieces together. Meanwhile, at 4:30 a.m. on Thursday, October 26th, the school sent a notice to parents announcing it would be closed due to a critical incident. A few hours later, another message followed. No students were involved. There was no ongoing threat, but the campus would remain a crime scene. Grief counselors were brought in to assist students and their families. By mid-morning, Lilie's body was removed from the scene and taken for autopsy. Back at the station, investigators were busy. They began watching hours of CCTV footage from the school, hoping to trace Lilie's last moments and uncover the identity of the man who called in her death. Soon, Lilie's friends and coworkers began to share information. Among them was a revelation. Lilie had been in a romantic relationship with a fellow coach, 24-year-old Paul Tyson. Though their relationship had been kept secret from administrators, friends confirmed that they were dating. Paul, it turned out, had also been assigned to work late on campus that night. He was installing desks in preparation for Year 12 exams. As part of his role, Paul also collected and organized sports equipment after team practices. He and Lilie had overlapping responsibilities that evening. People who saw Paul that day said nothing seemed off. He appeared calm, relaxed, just his usual self. But now, police had one major question. Where was he? Authorities issued an alert for Paul Tyson and began searching for him. Investigators then revisited the late-night call. Using cell tower triangulation, they traced the call's origin to Vaucluse, a coastal suburb known for its picturesque cliffs. Specifically, the call had come from near a location called the Gap. What made this area so chilling was its history. The Gap isn't just a scenic lookout over the Pacific Ocean. It's also a notorious suicide hotspot. The cliffs tower over 300 feet high in some areas, and the waves below are rough and relentless. Police feared the worst, that the caller may have taken his own life. A helicopter was deployed to search the coastline. Meanwhile, a public bulletin went out, identifying Paul Tyson as a person of interest in Lilie's murder. But the story didn't end there. Lilie's best friend, Christina, heard the news and wanted to help. She remembered that Paul and Lilie had visited her house in Vaucluse just a few weeks earlier, right near the cliffs where the call had originated. Christina and her father began scrubbing through their home's security footage. One of the cameras overlooked the driveway and the road in front of their house. At 8:47 p.m. on Wednesday, the night Lilie was killed, they found what they were looking for. The footage showed a silver Lexus driving slowly down the street. It stopped. The driver turned off the headlights and remained parked for over 15 minutes. At 9:03 p.m., a man dressed in dark clothing exited the vehicle and walked down the sidewalk in the direction of the cliffs. He returned about 10 minutes later, looking at his phone. He sat in the car for another half hour before finally driving off at 9:49 p.m. Investigators believe this man was Paul Tyson, and they suspected he was discarding evidence. Why? Because at the end of that same sidewalk, just before the boardwalk, there was a public trash bin. Police went to that exact location and searched the bin. Inside, they found a brand new hammer. It was clean, no blood, no DNA, but still suspicious. The hammer was taken in for further examination. Meanwhile, the Lexus, seen in the footage, was located parked just a short distance away. It was confirmed to be the car Paul had borrowed from a friend that day. The vehicle was cordoned off, and forensic teams began their work. Inside the car, they found bloody clothing, a pair of Apple AirPods, and a backpack containing Paul's belongings. Even more damning, they found a second hammer. This one was stained with blood. And it wasn't just any hammer. It belonged to the school. Paul had checked it out earlier that day to install desks for the senior exams. Lilie's autopsy later confirmed she had suffered more than 10 blows to the head, consistent with injuries from a blunt object like a hammer. The blood on the hammer in the Lexus matched hers. As horrifying as that discovery was, something else was even more disturbing. After killing Lilie, Paul had used her phone to send a text to her father, Jamie. Posing as Lilie, he wrote that she needed to be picked up from the school. But Jamie had already contacted police by that point. The message came too late. The act of texting Lilie's father from her phone, after ending her life, showed a chilling level of control, deception, and cruelty. With these details emerging, investigators realized this was no spontaneous crime. Paul had borrowed a friend's car, purchased a brand new hammer from a hardware store that morning, and planned where he would go afterward. He even returned to the very cliffs where he and Lilie had enjoyed a romantic afternoon just weeks before. By Thursday afternoon, October 26th, authorities were narrowing in on Paul Tyson's last known location, thanks to the footage from Christina's house in Vaucluse. The silver Lexus was found parked nearby, just a short walk from the cliffs at Diamond Bay Reserve. The vehicle was towed away for processing, and forensic experts began combing through the area. In the grass, the bushes, and along the cliff's edge, officers searched every inch. That's when they discovered more evidence. Near the cliffs, officers found a pile of clothing stained with blood. There were also a pair of Apple AirPods and a black backpack filled with Paul's personal belongings, confirming he had been there after Lilie's murder. But Paul himself was still missing. As the day passed, rescue units began preparing for the worst-case scenario. That Paul had jumped from the cliffs, Marine police units were dispatched, and the air search resumed using helicopters. If Paul had leapt from the cliff's edge, the churning waters of the Pacific Ocean could have carried his body for miles, or battered it beyond recognition against the sharp, jagged rocks below. Police set up a tent at the scene to coordinate their efforts. They used drones, jet skis, and rope crews trained in difficult recoveries. Still, hours passed with no confirmed sighting of Paul. Meanwhile, investigators revisited the Lexus. Inside, alongside the hammer and backpack, they located Paul's mobile phone. A digital forensics team quickly unlocked the device, and what they found made the case even more devastating. Paul had texted Lilie on Wednesday, asking her to meet him that night at the school for a talk. It wasn't unusual. They had recently broken up, and both still worked at St. Andrews. But Lilie had no idea what he was truly planning. Maybe she thought they'd talk things through calmly. Maybe she believed they could remain professional. Maybe she trusted the familiarity of her workplace. But it wouldn't matter. Because what happened that evening wasn't a conversation. It was a cold-blooded, premeditated murder. The final CCTV footage from inside the school told the story in chilling detail. At around 7 p.m., Lilie was seen walking down a hallway toward the staff bathroom. Paul followed close behind her. Minutes later, they entered the bathroom together, and Lilie never came out. For the next several hours, the bathroom remained closed. At some point later that night, Paul exited alone. Then he drove away. The footage was clear. The timeline was devastating. At 5 p.m. that same day, hours before the murder, Paul had purchased a brand new hammer from a local hardware store. That hammer was the one later found in the trash bin at Diamond Bay. This, paired with the hammer found in the Lexus, proved beyond doubt that Paul had been planning the attack. He took a weapon, brought it to the school, and murdered Lilie James. Her death wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated, calculated, cruel. On the morning of Friday, October 27th, a breakthrough came. At around 10:30 a.m., a construction crew working along the boardwalk near Diamond Bay Reserve made a discovery. They spotted what appeared to be a body wedged between the rocks below the cliff, being tossed violently by the waves. The police were immediately notified. A helicopter flew over the site, confirming what everyone feared. It was a man's body. Rescue teams, including a bomb disposal unit and marine specialists, were sent in. But the conditions were brutal. Powerful waves crashed into the rocks. A mist hung over the ocean's edge, making visibility difficult. It took several hours for rescuers to safely reach the body. When they did, they confirmed that the body was male, naked and badly battered. It had been tossed and torn by the violent surf. The remains were carefully retrieved and placed in a blue forensic tent before being transported for post-mortem examination. The identity wasn't officially confirmed until later, but police believed they had found Paul Tyson. Fingerprint records from the Dutch embassy were used to make the final identification. And just like that, the killer was dead. Paul Tyson, 24 years old, had ended his life after taking Lilie's. While the recovery operation was still underway, Lilie's family released a public statement. It was brief and emotional. "We are devastated and heartbroken by the loss of our beautiful Lilie James. She was vibrant, outgoing, and deeply loved by her friends and family. We are tremendously grateful for the support of this community at this difficult time." A close family friend told Daily Mail Australia that Lilie's entire circle was numb. "There are no words," they said. "We are completely numb." And who could blame them? In the blink of an eye, they had lost a daughter, a sister, a friend, someone full of potential, of joy, of kindness. A light had been extinguished. As the investigation continued, more unsettling details emerged. One of the most disturbing actions Paul had taken wasn't just the murder or the cover-up. It was what he did afterward. After killing Lilie and texting her father, Paul had driven to a place filled with memories. The cliffs of Diamond Bay Reserve, the same location where weeks earlier, he and Lilie had enjoyed a sunny, romantic afternoon walk. It seemed deliberate, almost symbolic. He parked near Christina's house, perhaps as a final connection to the life he had shared with Lilie. Then, he sat in the car for nearly 2 hours. What was going through his mind in that time? Was he contemplating what he had done? Was he debating whether to turn himself in? Was he praying, reflecting, spiraling? Or was it, as some experts later suggested, a final act of control? After all, the call he made wasn't hysterical or regretful. It was flat, almost robotic, as if the murder had already been compartmentalized in his mind. Criminologists soon weighed in. One leading expert, Dr. Xanthi Mallet from the University of Newcastle, described Paul's behavior as obsessive and controlling. She noted that his actions, from texting Lilie's father to discarding evidence to choosing the location of his death, all pointed to someone who didn't just want to end a relationship, but dominate its ending. He had to control the narrative, control Lilie's last moments, control how and when her body was found, and finally, control the manner in which he left the world. It was, in many ways, a performance, a twisted, cruel script of his own making. Dr. Mallet also pointed out that by using Lilie's phone to send that final text to her father, Paul was attempting to confuse the timeline of events. Perhaps he hoped it would throw off the police. Perhaps he wanted to torment her family one final time. But ultimately, it didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. The crime was premeditated. And Lilie's murder was not a moment of rage. It was a calculated, brutal act of violence by a man who couldn't accept rejection. That rejection, investigators learned, had come just days before the murder. After 5 weeks of dating, Lilie had decided to end the relationship. She told Paul gently, assuring him there was no one else. She just didn't feel the same way. She hoped they could remain professional, continue working together, and move on peacefully. But Paul couldn't let go. He was humiliated, furious, insecure, and according to friends, not used to hearing the word no. As investigators reviewed more of his behavior, patterns began to emerge. Students at St. Andrews began speaking up. Some recalled that Paul had a flirtatious nature. One student said he made them uncomfortable. Another described him as creepy. It seemed that beneath the polished, athletic exterior was a man with control issues, someone who saw Lilie as an extension of himself rather than an independent person. And when she tried to assert that independence, he reacted with deadly force. In the days following Paul Tyson's confirmed death, emotions were raw and overwhelming across Sydney, and far beyond. For Lilie's family, it was a devastating loss. She was their only daughter, a vibrant, compassionate, and driven young woman. She had so much to offer the world, and now she was gone. Her mother, Peta, and father, Jamie, remained largely silent in the days following her death, asking only for privacy and space to grieve. But the community was not silent. Memorials began popping up outside St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Flowers, candles, photos, and handwritten notes were left by students, parents, former staff, and even strangers. The city was grieving the death of someone they hadn't even met, because her story touched so many hearts. In the media, Lilie's murder was covered extensively. But as coverage intensified, controversy emerged, not about the crime itself, but about the school. St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where both Lilie and Paul had worked, quickly became a focal point of public scrutiny. Why? Because in the wake of the murder, the school's former principal, Dr. John Collier, made statements that shocked and infuriated many. In a school newsletter, Dr. Collier wrote the following: Paul Tyson was, in everyone's estimation, an absolute delight. I knew him years ago as a fine student, a prefect, a role model. He was not a monster. Rather, in the last 5 hours of his life, he committed a monstrous act. He went on to ask the school community to find forgiveness for Paul, citing religious values and divine grace. For many, this crossed a line. It wasn't just tone deaf. It was dangerous. Forgiveness? For a man who had bludgeoned a young woman to death in a school bathroom? Who had pretended to be her in a text to her grieving father? Who had carefully planned the murder and fled? Parents, students, and survivors of abuse were outraged. A parent who received the newsletter shared it publicly on social media, calling the principal's remarks a betrayal of Lilie's memory. The post went viral, sparking a wider conversation about how institutions often downplay or excuse male violence, especially when the perpetrator is someone they once held in high regard. This wasn't the first time St. Andrews had been accused of minimizing serious offenses. In fact, the newsletter prompted several former students to come forward with disturbing stories from years past, stories that painted a pattern of negligence and denial. Another disturbing case emerged from the same graduating class as Paul Tyson, a student who had played cricket alongside Paul, was later convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage girl on multiple occasions. He didn't serve jail time either. Yet, another boy from that same cohort was convicted of choking a girl who had rejected him. Again, no prison sentence, just home detention. What are the odds that 3 violent offenders came from the same graduating class at the same elite private school, and none of them faced serious legal consequences? This wasn't coincidence. It was culture. A culture of leniency, denial, and privilege. A culture where male students and staff were protected, where crimes were softened with euphemisms, where apologies were demanded from victims, not perpetrators. The cases may not have been directly related to Lilie's murder, but they painted a troubling backdrop, one that revealed just how easily institutions can protect predators and erase victims. Lilie James was murdered at her place of work, a school that had a duty to protect her. And that's why, in the weeks following her death, her parents began considering legal action against St. Andrews. They wanted answers. How was Paul Tyson allowed unsupervised access to the gym and its tools that night? Why was Lilie alone in the facility without another staff member nearby? What policies were in place to prevent this kind of interaction between 2 employees who had recently ended a romantic relationship? The school remained tight-lipped, but the public conversation kept growing. People began to look more broadly at violence against women in Australia, and the numbers were shocking. By the time Lilie was murdered in October 2023, she was the 41st woman in Australia to be killed by a current or former romantic partner that year. By December, that number had risen to 64. Let that sink in. 64 women murdered in the span of 1 year by men who once claimed to love them. Experts began repeating a chilling truth. The most dangerous time for a woman is right after she ends a relationship. That risk spikes in the first 2 weeks after a breakup. Lilie never made it to day 7. And the reality is, she did everything right. She ended the relationship calmly. She communicated honestly. She continued her work professionally. And she still died. Her case became a rallying cry, not just for justice, but for awareness, for prevention, for systemic change. In the weeks following her death, Lilie James was memorialized with a beautiful funeral service held at her former high school, Danebank. Hundreds of people attended. Family, friends, former teammates, students, and strangers. Her grandmother gave a short speech that many would remember for years to come. Some people come into this world who are just too special. They don't stay long. That was my granddaughter.
Some people come into this world, I think they're so special, and they don't stay long. And I think that was my granddaughter. She had a lot of fun, Lily, and she was so kind to everybody else. So kind. Just a beautiful person. A beautiful, beautiful young woman, and so full of life. Never stopped.
Lily's father, Jamie, also delivered a eulogy. He spoke of her love for sports, for family, for helping others. He thanked the community for their outpouring of love and support. And then, with a trembling voice, he said, "Lilie James, we are all so proud of you. Thank you for sharing your wonderful 21 and a half years with us." A GoFundMe page was created to help cover funeral expenses and support trauma services for her family. It reached thousands in donations. And through it all, her family remained silent on one thing: Paul Tyson. They never spoke his name publicly. They never acknowledged his existence. It was their way of refusing to give him power. After Paul Tyson's body was recovered from the rocks below Diamond Bay Reserve, investigators and psychologists began to piece together what kind of person he really was. On the surface, Paul was clean-cut, well-liked, athletic. He came from a privileged background. He had a charming smile, a leadership role in school, and glowing references from former teachers and coaches. But behind that perfect image was something more dangerous: a need for control. It's a common thread seen in many domestic violence cases, especially those involving young couples and short-term relationships. In fact, some experts argue that the shorter the relationship, the more dangerous the breakup can be, particularly if the controlling partner feels blindsided. According to Dr. Xanthi Mallet, a renowned criminologist who reviewed Paul's case, his actions after Lilie ended the relationship showed signs of obsession and entitlement. She said, he wanted to control not just Lilie's life, but the aftermath of her death. He staged the discovery of her body, sent messages on her phone, and chose a symbolic place for his own ending. It was about control from beginning to end. Lilie James was laid to rest in early November 2023. The funeral was held at Danebank Anglican School for Girls, where Lilie had once been a student herself. She was remembered not just as a victim, but as a vibrant, warm, and loving young woman. Hundreds of people gathered. There were teachers, coaches, teammates, former students, and close family friends. Many wore splashes of lilac, Lilie's favorite color, as a tribute to her joyful personality. Her coffin was carried into the chapel by family members, while You Raise Me Up played softly through the speakers. The music, the flowers, and the photographs all told the story of someone who had lived fully and generously, even if her life was cut tragically short. During the ceremony, her father, Jamie, stood at the pulpit and spoke through trembling breaths. He said, "There are no words that can capture the depth of pain we feel, but there are words that remind us of who Lilie was. She was kind, she was funny, she was loyal, and she was loved so deeply." He paused, holding back tears, and continued, "Lilie James, we are all so proud of you. Thank you for sharing your wonderful 21 and a half years with us. It was a moment no parent should ever endure. And yet, he stood tall for her. Here at Whispers of Crime, we believe in telling stories that matter, not just for the sake of shock or suspense, but to create connection, awareness, and maybe even change. This episode was hard. It was emotional. It was personal. And if you're still with me, thank you. Thank you for giving Lilie the time she deserves. Thank you for seeing her not just as a victim, but as a human being. And thank you for remembering. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please reach out to a local support organization. You are not alone. This has been Whispers of Crime. I'm Hannah. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, even the quietest stories deserve to be heard. Dot.